Hey everyone, Seth Chapman here with Living Large and Tiny Living. And so, with college coming up for me here pretty soon, this next fall, I'm having to consider where I'm going to park my tiny house. Now, I've still got to consider which college I'm going to, but I have to, once I get that decided, then I'll decide where to park. But I was thinking about the sort of three options that you have to as to where to park a tiny house. Now, there's the three main options. I'm sure there are other options, but these are probably going to be the easiest or simplest or most common three options. So I'll go ahead and get right into that. Number one is parking at an RV park. That will probably be the simplest option that you have. Everywhere, pretty much everywhere has an RV park or two or three or 10. But that's probably going to be the easiest option. Now it's going to cost probably $400 or $500 a month, something like that, and so there's an added expense in there versus some of the other options that I'll mention in a moment. But it's definitely the simplest, and kind of one of the things that you have to watch out for with RV spots is that some RV places won't allow tiny houses into their RV park. Now, the I think the reasoning for that is just because an RV is basically an RV, which is basically the next RV. So there's really not a difference between RVs. You know, they have at least a consistent build quality, consistent design, and there's really nothing out of the ordinary about them. But with tiny houses that are taking more of a risk, they could look like anything, and so they don't want just any tiny house coming into their RV parks. I think the more important factor with that, though, is the consistent build quality. Now, our tiny houses have the NOAA certification, so they can get certified that way, and that will probably help you get into RV parks. If an RV park knows that you have built to a certain standard, that'll probably help get you into some of those. I think that's, off the top of my head, I'm thinking it's about $500 to get it certified, which is probably something that you would want to get done just so you have the peace of mind knowing that it's certified. And if you go to any RV parks or any locations that would restrict you based on knowing that you're certified. A final point to kind of think of with your RV parks is also some expenses will be taken care of. Like a lot of times water will be taken care of where you're not paying water, Wi-Fi or electricity is paid for, or you have to pay for electricity or whatever the case may be. Some of those utilities will be paid for, and you don't have to think about those outside of the monthly payment. Now, parking your tiny house in an RV park is probably not going to be your first choice. You're probably thinking of some beautiful countryside lot where you can park it and maybe looking out over the country or out over a beach or up in the mountains or whatever it may be. But RV parks probably aren't your first choice. So another option is to find land, a lot somewhere, whether it be in the city or the country, and find somewhere where you can park your tiny house. So one of the things that you have to consider, though, within the city is that a lot of cities have zoning issues with tiny houses and not allowing them on there, where they have certain restrictions, like has to be on a foundation or has to have a driveway, or whatever the case may be. It varies from city to city, and I know I have some viewers outside of the country, so I can't really talk to y'all too much about this, but I'm sure it's probably generally the same issue everywhere. But for the city zoning issues, you'll have to look into that. There's some cities that are kind of allowing it, and so you'll have to kind of look into that yourself. But make sure to look into that before buying the land or even building your tiny house, because you don't want to be stuck looking for a spot to park it after you've built your tiny house and have to wait a while to figure out where that's going to go. Now, out in the country, if you're out in the county, that's a little bit different. Usually, the counties don't have the same regulations on the land that the cities do, because the counties are pretty much just under the state jurisdiction and don't impose any kind of restrictions beyond that. So they're a little more lenient. But one thing that you have to consider about being out in a county is sometimes there'll be restrictions placed on the land you buy by the previous owner. They might put some sort of stipulation in there that you can't have mobile homes or tiny houses or trailers or something like that. And there's various other things, and that's just sort of to protect the land if they're still living by nearby that, or have land for sale next to that. They want to keep it looking nice, and so they might have those restrictions on the land. So you have to consider that. But beyond that, it's usually pretty easy to get land out in the county, and you can find land just outside the city limits in the county, and usually you're pretty close to everything within the city. So that's a definite option to consider if you want to buy your own land. All right, so the third option for parking a tiny house somewhere is probably going to be one of the harder options to find, but is a good option, and that's a tiny house community. So I'll give you an example of kind of why it would be harder to find. And so I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that's a pretty large metroplex. But the problem with the tiny house communities is that from the center of Fort Worth or Dallas, you're basically looking at like a 45-minute to an hour and a half drive to the community, depending on where you're going. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I really want to drive 3 hours a day just to live in a tiny house community. There'd be too much gas to be driving back and forth, and I don't want to spend that much of my day just to commute to work and back. So here's going to be kind of my call to action for the tiny house communities and for you individually. So if you can't find a tiny house community, it would be great if you would start one for us all, because we could use a few more tiny house communities around here and have somewhere good to park. But unfortunately, there's not too many of them. And I don't know about other areas and how it fares for them, but I'm sure it's probably generally the same everywhere, where you're looking at just having one or two, or them being really far away, or something along those lines. So if you get the opportunity, go ahead and make a tiny house community out there, and let me know. That would be great. But if you do get the opportunity, that would be pretty cool to do. I know some of them have started in the cities. I know of 2 or 3 up north that are pretty much smack dab in the middle of a city. So if you can do that, that's a really great option then, if you're close to wherever you're going or commuting to. That pretty much wraps up what I have to say about those 3 options there. If I missed anything, or if you're in a different area in the country or out of the country, let me know what it's like out there where you live. And if there's anything that you know of that I missed, let me know down in the comments, and maybe that'll go into a future video. And if not, we can at least all learn from it in the comments below. Now, if you'd like to stay up to date with everything going on with my tiny house, and maybe some helpful information and more videos, you can either like and subscribe here, or you can also head on over to Facebook or Instagram and follow me at Living Large and Tiny Living. Occasionally I'll have some updates there that don't quite make it onto YouTube, but are still kind of helpful. So that's about it for this video. So I'll catch you on the next video.